Welcome to Arts Review on 88.9 FM WDNA. I'm Howard Stone. So glad you're with us. Well, it's September in South Florida. Some would view this time of year as the real start of hurricane season. Others would enthusiastically view this time of year as the start of football season. But listeners of this show eagerly view this time of year as the start of the performance season in South Florida. In the weeks to come, I'll be chatting with people closely connected with the performance season, starting with the producing artistic director at the GableStage in Coral Gables, Bari Newport. Bari is with us today, and we welcome Bari to Arts Review. Hello, Bari.
Hey, Howard. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. Remember, right about this time last year, we were discussing the 22-23 performance season at the GableStage, and now we have the current season, 23-24, to talk about. And I'll note that this is the 25th anniversary of live theater excellence in Coral Gables at the GableStage. Can you just take a moment and reflect on the trajectory of GableStage going back 25 years to where it is today, to where it's heading from your point of view?
Sure. I mean, to really talk about GableStage, one has to go back really even further. One has to go back to 1989, which is when the Florida Shakespeare Theater, which is what GableStage really was born as, was founded. It was founded by two female best friends in Coral Gables. It started by performing the Shakespearean canon, first at Vizcaya outside, and then eventually it moved to a permanent home where Merritt Park Mall is now. The Hurricane Andrew destroyed that, and 25 years ago, the company moved into what insiders know to be the horse stables, the original horse stables at the Biltmore Hotel, which had been converted into a performance space. And a year later, and if anybody ever wants to take a tour with me, I can show you. There's one place in the Biltmore that still says Florida Shakespeare Theater on an elevator panel, which I love because it really does look all the way back to GableStage's roots. And a year after it moved into the Biltmore, Joe Adler took over as producing artistic director, changed the name of the company to GableStage, and also changed the mission of the company to confront today's issues and ideas. Joe, was considered the godfather of South Florida theater and was involved not only in theater making, but, significantly in film and commercials for many, 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 many years. He went to Miami Beach High, and he had a very tight, long-standing relationship with the entire community. And he was really the first one in this region to do plays that were contemporary and what people would define as cutting edge. There wasn't a Zoetic stage at the time. There wasn't really anyone. There wasn't a Miami New Drama. There wasn't anyone doing what could be classified as off-Broadway work. And part of the thought process, certainly at that time, and when I was at Florida Repertory Theater, the thought process at that time was the same, which is you don't want people to have to go to New York to see the latest Pulitzer Prize winner or the latest very, very contemporary voice on stage. One shouldn't have to go to New York. The whole mission of regional theater in this country was to have professional theater making done for and by different communities all over the place, all over this country. And that's part of what makes it a unique regional theater system in the United States, in that if a community, it's very democratic. If a community wants a theater company, they have to support it. But the idea of GableStage and the idea of all the regional theaters across the country is to have professional artists live and work in the community and tell stories that directly resonate with that particular community. You know, every community is different. GableStage really thrived under Joe's leadership, and it was during a very specific time in the growth of Miami, and also in the growth of a generation of people whose parents were heavy subscribers and theater goers. And so Joe's audience are a sophisticated bunch who are generally literary minds who want really good work that pushes the envelope and gives them something to talk about on the car ride home. So all of those elements of what makes GableStage what it is, which is described as edgy and fresh and youthful in its approach, all of that remains the same now, even after Joe's death in April of 2020 at 80 years old. All of that we carry forward. But times change, so my job is to continuously freshen it up and figure out all the ways to resonate the storytelling that we're doing on stage with different generations of audience who are coming up and who may not have had the experience of their parents being subscribers and going to, you know, everything.
So in addition to the challenge of bringing theatrical excellence to our town, you really face the challenge of awakening the live theater experience for young people, however we define young people, folks who have grown up with computers and Netflix and all of that. Totally.
But young people want to have, you know, experiences, and I think it is important to define what a young person is. I mean, I'm 47, and
oh, you're young.
I think in many you know, ways, I am considered young people. Certainly, when it comes to a theater-going audience, you know, which at this point, you know, most of the hardcore theater-goers of the past are closing in on 80. You know. And that audience really grew with Joe. They were his contemporaries. So the trick now is to keep those audience members because they are the most engaged with GableStage and have the most history with it and really have an investment into its future. One of the first thing after does it fit our mission when I'm choosing plays is why here, why now? And if you can answer that, then you can define, you know, who the specific audience is for that particular story.
Well, let's get to that in just a moment. But let's talk about the particular setting of GableStage. You've mentioned that it's on the grounds of the Biltmore Hotel and the historic part of Coral Gables. It's a leafy residential setting, so it's a different experience even to get there than it would be to a downtown venue. And the performance hall itself is very small and very intimate. And I'm wondering from your point of view, how does that affect the way everything from lighting to props to the dialogue? How does that affect the actors and the presentation as opposed to a larger hall?
Well, I mean, I think one of the major components of why audience find coming to GableStage to be unique is because it is so intimate. I mean, there's really not a bad seat. Like, there can't be. There's only 138 of them. And so you are able to have an experience with the text and with the actors, which, you know, is really, really intimate. And you're not able to experience that, you know, when you're sitting you know, in row Q or row M at a larger facility. You know, the future of us in that space definitely includes an engineer coming in there and figuring out a way to move the audience on the sides so that it's more of a three-quarter thrust rather than what it is right now, which is very, very long and narrow. I also think that the inside of that theater should look and feel like the inside of the Biltmore. I think it should be magical and rich and velvety, and chandelier-y. And again, like, how does that fit into anything? Well, I think the experience of going to a theater is very much part of developing a new audience. And there's something very secret about GableStage. It's hidden in there, and you kind of have to be in the know to know that it's there. These are all positives. I mean, on marketing, in terms of marketing, it's tough, but in terms of making sure that everyone who comes there has a personal experience, number one, and number two, that you are doing something and at a place that is unknown to the masses, that it's like a secret. It's almost a secret. And it's also like, a very special experience to come to the Biltmore. The Biltmore itself is so dramatic. It's a difficult space to do plays in, for sure. From an audience perspective, I think it's like very, very, very exciting to be that intimate. From a director's standpoint, you never want to be directing in a tennis court, where people are turning their heads back and forth. We do not have a backstage unless we create it with a set. We have one dressing room, which means that, we can only do shows of a certain size because we can't fit the people. It means that because it's an old building, every time we change lights or sound equipment or anything in the air, which is for every single show, it means we have to go up to the grid, which is very time consuming instead of the grid coming down to us. But theater making since the beginning of time was never easy, never ever. And that's part of the magic of the whole thing, that there's just so much that goes into every element so that when the audience is there, you are able to have a magic experience without any breaks.
Well, Bari, it's clear that as producing artistic director, that you wear many hats. The one that's the most fascinating to me is, as I understand it, you are actually the one who designs the performance season. Now, with respect to this season, we have five performances monthly between September and June of 2024. How is it that a season is designed with multiple genres of theater productions in the same season?
I think of it as a menu at a restaurant. And all restaurants are different, right? You can go to an Italian restaurant that's maybe like a mom and pop place, and maybe it has like a huge menu, and a lot of that, maybe a lot of the main courses are like traditional. Maybe they're spaghetti and meatballs. Maybe they're done with a certain flair. But it's a wide variety of offerings on one menu that all create the vibe, the characteristic of that particular restaurant. At the GableStage restaurant, we confront today's issues and ideas. So that's the very first thing that I look for. Does it meet the mission of the company? That's one.
With presumably so many performances and scripts and actors available, how do you whittle the season down to these particular 5 performances?
Well, I start really early. So, right now I'm very actively working on 24-25. Or is that the right next season?
I think it is.
24-25. Seems crazy, right? But yeah, that's what's happening, because a lot of properties, like the Lehman trilogy that we're doing this year, are, either going to be very hot properties or are already very hot properties. And so, like so much of play selection is acquisition of rights and being able to look far enough ahead and know enough, not just about what's happening in New York, but what's happening all over the country, to also, have a depth of knowledge of playwrights that that the trajectory of their work may suit you down the road. So like Lehman Trilogy, I mean, I will admit this is not the first time I've done this, but we absolutely did this for Lehman Trilogy right before it was available. We sent a giant cookie to the licensing agent that said subprime mortgages or bust, because, of course, the Lehman Trilogy is about the Lehman brothers. And subprime mortgages or bust, GableStage wants Lehman. And, I mean, I've done stuff like that a long time, all different things. But, you know, there's all different ways to put a season together in terms of making sure that you have the hottest property at that time.
I'll note that virtually all of the 5 performances in the upcoming season are either local premieres or regional premieres. So that suggests to me that these are hot scripts, and that you've got to get busy to try and get to the head of the list of halls that will have the opportunity to put on these performances. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's important that we're the first. That keeps GableStage's reputation as the leader, certainly a leader in producing professional contemporary work in Miami. Making sure that we're the first ones is very important. And not just the first ones in Miami, but the first ones, really in South Florida. Yeah, and it's a mixture. You know, they're not all new plays either. Old Wicked Songs has just never been done in Miami. It's a Pulitzer finalist from '96, and I was surprised that it hadn't been done in Miami. But it absolutely fits the mission. I can absolutely answer the question, why here, why now, which I have to do for every play. So the larger mission of GableStage includes classic work. And so every year I try and have a classic. Every year I try and have a Miami story, which is Laughs in Spanish this year, something that directly takes place in or directly reflects the community itself. Something like How I Learned What I Learned. I mean, that is August Wilson's final play that he wrote for himself. He performed it. It's an autobiographical play about his life, from being a young poet in Pittsburgh to being arguably certainly one of the most important voices of the 20th century. And it had never been performed in Miami either. Well, let's tick through these 5 performances that are coming down the pike for us. But before doing so, I'm obliged to remind our listening audience that you are listening to Arts Review on 88.9 FM WDNA. Our guest this morning is Bari Newport, who is the producing artistic director at GableStage in Coral Gables. Bari, can you stay with us for another few moments? Of course. All right. Super. Well, we've talked about the diversity of the menu of 5 performances. Let's go through these, and if you can just enlighten us in a couple of sentences of what each of these performances offer the viewing audience and why you selected them. The first, as you mentioned a moment ago, is August Wilson's How I Learned What I Learned. Is this a one-man performance, basically a soliloquy? It is. And like I mentioned, August Wilson actually wrote it for himself in 2014, and since then it's been obviously performed by other people. But what I love about this piece is that actually somebody mentioned this to me, that everything in our season celebrates the art of creation in one way or another. I love How I Learned What I Learned because it is a Black story, but it is not a trauma story. It's a joyful story, and it's a story for everyone about how each of us have the power to create, the godly power to create inside of ourselves. So the fact that August Wilson, an African-American, grew up in Pittsburgh, I believe. The story is still universal and has applicability to those of us here in South Florida as well. It has applicability to every human being on the face of the earth, whether you're in Miami or you're in Pakistan. It doesn't. It is a human story of how each of us are endowed with the creative spirit. It's about finding your voice.
It's a very powerful piece. We have a local actor named Robert Strain, who has been in other GableStage productions. He's actually a Coral Gables resident. He is a 20-year professor at Florida Memorial University. And this piece really, really spoke to me. I've wanted to do it for a long time. Anything that elevates the human spirit and our ability to all be artists, I always want to shed light on.
Now,
it's being directed by Carrie Brianna Hart, who is a local actor, director. She is the longtime stage manager at the M Ensemble. And we are welcoming 100 students from Florida Memorial University and 50 students from the Seed School, all to experience this very, very powerful, funny, contemporary story. But actually, I think the coolest thing about this particular version of this production, our version, is the set design. And it has been a really fun and complicated endeavor that I certainly have never done before, and I don't think I've seen it before on stage, which is that we're creating the entire city of Pittsburgh that is not life-size, obviously, but scaled to a point where the actor can walk through it. It will take up the entire set, the entire stage, so very wide. It has every river, every bridge. There's 160 buildings. It's like a giant, giant train set. We've laser cut every building, every bridge, and the actor will use that as his playground, as well as some pretty heavy-duty projections.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And now this one, as you mentioned, this one has been described as surprisingly funny. And the next show on the agenda, which would be November, December, is called The Thanksgiving Play. This one is also has been described as a very funny, clever satire. And I'm wondering whether you ascribe to the philosophy of one of my favorite authors, Tom Robbins, who writes that humor is essential to imparting wisdom. Is there some measure of truth to that? And so talk to us about the Thanksgiving Play, the second one for this season.
Sure. I mean, the first play, How I Learned What I Learned, is funny in that very way, that August Wilson is, possibly the greatest writer of our time and, is extremely wise in his way of getting one to deeply, deeply, deeply understand and therefore be empowered by the new realizations. The Thanksgiving Play I'm directing, I've known Larissa Fasthorse, the playwright, for a long time. She sent me this play when I was in Maine because I was doing a lot of work with Penobscot Nation, which is a Native American nation that was 8 miles away from Penobscot Theater Company. I've always been very interested in First Nations storytelling and got really, really, really involved in it in Maine. When Larissa sent me the play, it was 2017, I believe. The version that was just on Broadway, and Larissa was the first that we know of Indigenous American woman to have a play on Broadway, this play. I didn't think it was appropriate for what we were doing at the time in Maine at that theater company in 2017. However, it is so right for GableStage and so relevant, and I actually spent the whole weekend working on it, and I'm really excited about our production of it. It's very funny, and it stars all local actors that audiences who come to GableStage and audiences that go to other theater companies will know.
And we go to the third performance, which is called Old Wicked Songs.
Yep.
This one does not seem to be a satire. This one seems to be a taut, intense, thoughtful performance, no?
Yeah, but it's, I love this play because it's a mystery at its heart, and it's also it's based on a true story of the playwright. The playwright is coming to direct it, And it stars two actors who have to be classically trained pianists because it is just filled with music that is all played live on stage on a baby grand.
Oh, how great.
So, yeah, it's a really cool play. Like I said, it was nominated for a Pulitzer in '96 and has never been done in Miami. So it is a modern classic, and I really wanted to have something on our menu that had music in it, and this one has a ton of music in it. It has an older character and a younger character, and on a menu of offerings, having something that could be defined as a mystery is a pretty important component.
Interesting. Okay. And then the fourth performance is what you mentioned earlier. This is already in the spring of next year, the Lehman Trilogy, which invokes the Lehman Brothers controversy involving investment fraud and misrepresentations. And I'm wondering, how do you keep a performance like this from getting overly bogged down in technical, financial terms, concepts, and the like?
Well, it's actually, really not about that. It's the end of the play touches on that. That's how the play ends. But it goes through 165 years of a family coming from Bavaria with nothing, starting a very small general store that in Montgomery, Alabama, that sold shovels to the plantations, and how the American dream allowed these people, this family, to, over 165 years, build a company that really helped build America. Investments in the railroad, investments in King Kong. They survived the Civil War. They survived the Great Depression. It is a family story that involves three actors. It's in 3 acts. It's an epic undertaking. It is a Southern Jewish story, which I relate to because my mother's side is a Jewish family from Jonesboro, Arkansas. The story that resonates with anyone who is ambitious or loves their family, and it's really not about the financial crisis as much as it is about building something so tall that there's no way to keep it standing.
And then finally, the fifth performance, which takes us into the late spring of next year, is called Laughs in Spanish. And I imagine this would qualify as the Miami-based story that would have appeal, particularly to those of us that live in South Florida.
Oh, yeah, totally. Although it premiered at the Denver Center, I will say. It premiered last year. That was its very first production. Alexis Shear, of course, grew up in Miami and is, she most recently worked on Andrew Lloyd Webber's Broadway production of Bad Cinderella. She's an extremely accomplished playwright. And she called me and specifically said she wanted GableStage to produce this production, which she's been continuing to work on and adapt since the Denver production. I believe this is the second production of this play. It takes place in Wynwood during Art Basel. It's a mother-daughter story. Even though it's laughs in Spanish, it's in English. It's bawdy and heartfelt and very, very funny.
And it seems like it's a perfectly fitting way to conclude the upcoming season. Bari, are tickets available both on a subscription basis for the entire season as well as individual performance tickets?
Yeah, they're on sale now. Subscribers, like I said, they're not subscriptions like in the old days where you had to go on a Thursday for every play. They're flexible subscriptions that you can use in any way you want. You can use all the tickets for one show, or you can spread them out over all the productions. And if you're still unsure, we have a really popular event that we're producing on October 14th. It's called Taste of the Season. And we do 2-hour-long previews of all the shows of the season. And then we end up at a local mansion and we have dinner after each one of the shows at this enormous home that is like totally decked out Kardashian style for Halloween. And we have restaurants, the best restaurants from Coral Gables, donating a ton of food that night. And so it's our season kickoff. We did it last year. It was extremely popular. And it's a delicious way to really learn not only about the season, but of the spirit of GableStage.
Super.
And I play a leading role on these nights. I play a character.
All right.
We write a script that embodies all the shows.
We have been speaking with Bari Newport, who is the producing artistic director at GableStage at the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables. Bari, is there a website where folks can click onto and get more ticket information?
Sure, you can get ticket information. You can also find out about our education programs and all of our community outreach, all of which has really exploded in the last 2 years, and it's at GableStage.org.
Short and sweet. Well, Bari Newport, we thank you for carving time out of your surely busy and hectic schedule as we reach the cusp of the 2023-2024 performance season. It's great to have you back on the show, and we look forward to some great shows this season.
I look forward to seeing you and Miriam, and I really thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bari. Till we meet again.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye. This has been Arts Review on 88.9 FM WDNA. As always, I enjoyed myself immensely, and I hope you did as well. I will see you 2 Wednesdays from today with another edition of Arts Review. Until then, enjoy the cultural arts.